In chapter 3 of The Secret Garden, we discover that Mary Lennox is taking a journey. And I think as we progress in the book, we'll find that it's not too much unlike the epic hero's journey. That's one of the reasons that I'm presenting and studying this book myself. I like books, I like literature that deals with that is of epic proportion, deals with stories that are of epic proportion. And I'm not sure that youth literature has continued, in every case has continued in that vein. But in order for Mary in chapter 3 to make her journey, she has to first cross the moor. And we're going to find that there's a bridge there and there's a waterway. I actually think that, or maybe a perceived waterway. The moor, one of the most important things that happens in chapter 3 is that Mary wakes up. She's been asleep in the carriage, and she wakes up, and that's when the journey begins. Sleep during the course of my own journey. We're going to find that another little girl makes another epic journey. And if I can find the picture that she meets these odd characters on the way. She meets a mentor or two. But then she makes this journey. She traverses a path. She crosses a path. And while she's out I'll talk about that later, but the birds are important. But along the path, she also falls asleep, and I can't find the picture right now, but everybody who is American and who are British knows this to be true. She and her friends fall asleep in a poppy field. In a month that's not too, but she goes through a wild forest but she meets some heroic friends that don't know that they're heroic. And I think that's also part of our discovery process. But then eventually, and I don't know if it's in here, the deadly poppy field. The deadly poppy field. I've already said before that sleep can be regenerative, but it can also be a time of avoidance. In both of these books, The Wizard of Oz and The Secret Garden, the protagonist falls asleep during the course of her journey. Well, I'm not sure what month it is, but pretty soon, a couple of months away, we're going to read together The Wizard of Oz and discover that this is another story of epic proportion. But anyway, so the first start in chapter 3, and then the carriage approaches Misselthwaite Manor that is all walled off. It's walled off inside and outside. There are rooms she can't go into, and the rooms that she can't go into. There's a book that I want to discuss immediately that I see has many similarities to this story, and I didn't really realize that until I did this deep dive just this week into this book. Before, I've always sort of skimmed through the book. It's okay, it's an old book. But as I got into it, I found that many of the themes, crossing a waterway, Mary in chapter 3 says that she thinks she hears an ocean. She thinks she hears a waterway. This ocean, it's a dark black ocean that she describes, is something that she has to cross. Okay, where the wild, and another thing, in both the secret garden and where the wild things are, the protagonists have a period of being nasty human beings. Everybody's heard this. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind or another. I can get the page done. And another, chasing the dog with a fork. Wolf suit. And this reminds me of another book we're going to discuss this month, Wolves in the Wall, Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is also, what I'm trying to do is make a link in literature from the romantic writers. William Wordsworth, I've wandered lonely as a cloud, lonely. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to his bed without eating anything. That very night, in Max's room, a forest grew. A forest. I'm talking about trees and the importance of trees. And grew. And grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around him. Okay. Sindak came along, probably almost 100 years, maybe a full 100 years after Frances Hodgson Burnett. She described, in chapter 4, she describes the room where Mary Lennox wakes up in the first morning. When she opened her eyes in the morning, it was because the servant had come into her room to light the fire. Okay, Mary's fire has been lit. She is conquering the darkness, and she finds in her room that the wallpaper is like a forest. So, and another thing that is very similar, so both of them cross a sea, both Max and Mary Lennox cross a sea of types. There. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max. And he sailed off through night and day. Night and day. Major literary theme in The Secret Garden and in most books since that time. In music, poetry, films, the struggle from night to day is an epic journey in itself. But to get today, we are passing through, or we're making a journey, a hero's journey across a waterway. He sailed in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. So he goes to the land of the wild things. And then he finally discovers to really fully awaken from this. Is it a nightmare? Is it a dream? And sail back to his home of origin, or not necessary. It was, in this case, it was his home of origin. It was Max's home. He gets bored. He realizes that this isn't it. This wildwood is part of his journey. It's not the full journey. So what he has to do is Max has to sail back across that ocean again, and sail back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day, this time into the light. And into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. We find almost those exact words in the story of the secret garden. And this time, those words are in chapter 3. And then Mary Lennox was led up a broad staircase and down a long corridor, and up a short flight of steps, and through another corridor, and another, and a door opened in a wall, and she found herself in a room with a fire in it and supper on a table. I'm at the very beginning of this study of the secret garden, I readily acknowledged, I ostensibly was doing this study for families, but I've discovered probably the first day that I was primarily making this study for myself, because I actually taught I taught a writing course in a college, and the course was writing about literature. And one of the books that I had my students study was Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury has a prologue that begins in October. I, for years, have been enamored with the book Tuck Everlasting. And she begins her study. This is the 40th anniversary. And one thing I want to show is that this continuum there's a continuum of writers that have been influenced probably by Romanticism, at least since the writing of William Wordsworth, through today. And I'm quite sure that J.R.R. Tolkien is one of those people who has been influenced, and like him, Neil Gaiman, Max Sindak, Natalie Babbitt, Ray Bradbury. But in this prologue of Tuck Everlasting, the first week of August, hangs at the very top of a Ferris wheel, the very top of summer, the top of the livelong year. Both Ray Bradbury's both Ray Bradbury's Something This Way Comes and Tuck Everlasting make a valiant leap into the fact that the seasons of the year are seasons of life. In chapter 4, Mary meets the robin. And the robin, everybody knows the robin is the bird of springtime. So as she enters that garden, the very first time, not the secret garden, but the gardens, she discovers this robin who flits over into a garden that is caged away from her entering it. It's springtime in Mary's life. She's in the summer of her life. She's not a baby. She's about 10 years old. But it's the springtime of her journey. She can see over in that other caged off garden, trees growing. The robin flits over into the caged off area. The robin in a epic journey, in a hero's journey, the protagonist finds one or more mentors that lead them along their path. The robin is one of Mary's mentors, but she'll also find an old gardener. June, summer will meet the age of this old gardener, and they become her mentors that lead her through her journey. So stay with me. I've changed my initial reading list so that I think there's something very valuable in the course of the literary journey. I think that for me, Wind in the Willows. Wind in the Willows is also about the wildwood and a journey. The badger it starts out with the badger who lives underground, and he can't really see because it's dark down there. The mole had been working hard all the morning, trying to whitewash, trying to make his house bright and light, but he hears signs of spring. So he crawls out of that dark hole into the wild world, the real world, and he begins his own epic journey. So stay with me. Month by month, we're going to make our own epic journeys through literature.